A very warm good afternoon to all of you. I am Sakshi, welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and First View Group to the webinar titled Navigating Telangana's Energy Landscape,
Actually, we're not
Market
able to
Trends.
hear you.
Am I audible to all?
I can hear you.
All right, great. So, we are here on our webinar titled Navigating Telangana's Energy Landscape, Market Trends, and Solar Innovation. Before we proceed, I would like to express my gratitude to our esteemed speakers for their unwavering support, which has paved the way for this event. Their dedication to advancing renewable energy is truly applause-worthy and will contribute significantly to Telangana's energy revolution. A heartfelt thank you to our audience, of course, who are joining us from various corners of the country to explore Telangana's regulatory framework and state energy profile. Feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box throughout the discussion and our speakers will address them once we conclude the session. Our event is designed to offer a thorough overview and analysis of the current market outlook, policies, regulations, and solar innovations influencing the state's energy landscape. During the event, we shall be examining the impact of existing policies and regulations, sustainable initiatives, milestone projects, and technological advancements in Telangana's renewable energy sector. The key discussion points that will revolve around our topics will be Telangana's recent energy policy changes and its implications on the energy sector, latest draft regulations, potential impact on energy distribution and consumption, reviewing sustainable initiatives to install rooftop solar systems at government schools, significance of India's largest floating solar power plant, and emerging solar technologies and their potential applications. May I now request my team to play the video for our upcoming physical event of on Telangana, that is Solar Quarter Business Meet Telangana, which is going to take place on March 1st in Hyderabad, Telangana. Solar Quarter Business Meet Telangana 2024 is the largest solar meet in the state with a gathering of around 175. The Business Meet is the largest solar meet in the state with a gathering of around 175 plus top professionals from solar industry. The biggest solar gathering will include professionals, officials from state government, nodal agencies, renewable consultancy, financial institutions, ground-mounted floating solar, open access, and C&I stakeholders, including many more. Thank you for playing that video, team. A little request to the audience, kindly post your questions in the Q&A box during the duration of the discussion and our speakers will take up those once we conclude the panel discussion. Without any further delay, allow me to introduce the esteemed speakers for today. We have Mr. Vinay Paba from Vibrant Energy, who shall be the moderator. Mr. Naveen from Helios Energy, Ms. Priyamvada Pandit from SMA, Mr. Vishnu Reddy from Fourth Partner Energy, and Mr. Anish Dev from Amplus Solar. Over to you, Mr. Vinay. Sir, I think you are on mute.
Thank you, Sakshi. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Thanks for the introductions, and I really appreciate the preface that you've given for this online moderated panel discussion. I'll be a moderator for next 45 minutes. We have a distinguished lineup of panelists today discussing the changing energy landscape of Telangana, the energy transition narrative of Telangana, and the market trends and solar innovations that are happening in the state. Uh, the discussion will be very Telangana focused and take a look at the historical past, the context in which the story is playing out here, and what the future looks like. We have with us a set of three speakers. The fourth one is about to join. He's in a flight in an airport. Naveen will be joining us while the discussion goes on. I will request each of the speakers, starting with Priyambada, to quickly introduce themselves and set the I'll do the context setting post the introductions. Over to you, Priyambada.
Okay, thank you, Vinasa. I'm Priyamvada here from SMA India. I work as technical sales support manager, and we look after India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, entire region from here. I've been associated with SMA for I'll complete 10 years this year, so it's a long association with SMA. And the as a technical sales support, I'm responsible for understanding the requirements of the customer, typically from the application point of view, designing the systems, and accordingly providing the solutions. Uh, that is the brief from my side introduction.
Nice and sweet. Vishnu, can you also
Yeah.
introduce?
Yeah, hi, Vinaya. Hi, everyone. This is Vishnu
Where can you
from
open the car, please?
Port Partner Energy, and I am looking after business development, open access sales for entire South Zone, and even ISTS also. So this is from my end, Vinay.
Thanks, Vishnu. Anish, can you briefly introduce yourself? Anish, it will be good to also have your video on. That's helpful and increases the engagement levels. Can you hear us? Okay, I think we have lost connection there. Naveen, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm Naveen. I represent Ilios Power. We've been building solar power plants since the last 12 years. We were very active in AP and Telangana until 2016. But after that, we started venturing out. We've been building solar plants in India and even in Africa and Caribbean. Uh, I'm glad that I think there are some positive changes that are going to happen in Telangana. So I think we would be discussing those now. Yes,
Thank
Vinay.
you. Appreciate the introduction and also appreciate the fact that you come on the call despite being on travel. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thanks, Vinay.
To give a brief context of for the visitors and the audience, Telangana is a very unique state where it comes to energy transition story that is playing out. It's very different from the way it's playing out in the rest of the country. Uh, Especially the last 9 to 10 years, things have played out very differently in Telangana. The Telangana came out with for those of us who look back a decade into the story, Telangana came out with a fairly forward-looking solar policy in 2015. It's one of the youngest states in India, so the policy also reflected the youth and the vigor of the state. Unfortunately, things kind of fizzled out after that. The policy was never really notified, and quite a few of its provisions were not really implemented on the ground. It attempted and came out with a draft wind policy briefly, but it never got converted into a final form wind policy. So both on the solar and wind front, it would be technically correct to say that they don't officially have any policy as on date. Uh, the situation has been very similar for ease of getting open access for private developers who have been putting up solar and wind plants. After a large public procurement tender, which saw setting up of about 3,500 megawatts of solar capacity. It has been practically the market has been dead for quite a long period. So there have been no tenders coming out for the last 8 to 9 years. Uh, as against this kind of dark narrative that we have here, the rooftop sector has been doing pretty well, and net metering rooftops have been growing at a very fast clip in Telangana. If that is the historical context of the state, the elections have brought in place a new government and a new thinking on the whole approach to energy transition and the use of renewables and the place of renewables in Telangana's energy transition story. There's a lot of fresh thought, there's a lot of fresh thinking going on, and there's a huge amount of optimism that people are bringing when they talk about Telangana and what they expect from Telangana in times to come. Uh, we will be discussing those, and critical key points for discussion will be the upcoming open access policy, which also marries the best of practices both on open access policies anywhere in the country and also the green energy open access rules. So that is on the anvil. We expect a lot of change there. We also expect a review of the ease of granting of permissions and procedures on the ground. Uh, what we also expect is probably a revisiting of the very high cross subsidy and and additional surcharges that Telangana had announced 6 months back. We're expecting a review of that. That's another thing to be very optimistic about. And in the C&I markets and the utility markets, we expect vendors to come in. They're thinking on those lines, and also expectation that a fairly large volume of tenders would be coming out from from Telangana. We have with us today, so Premada brings, like you said, product expertise, technology expertise. Naveen has been heading Helios for a long time now. Uh, he's one of the primary and one of the pioneering developers to have come out of the city of Hyderabad. Vishnu also has a Hyderabad connection. Fourth partner does a huge amount of C&I projects across the country, pan India, and has a deep understanding of the open access regulations, how are they playing out elsewhere, and how they're playing out in Telangana. Anish, of course, comes with a lot of the company Amplus comes with a lot of solar rooftop expertise, one of the leading and pioneering rooftop developers that we have India has seen so far. So it's a mix of developer expertise, rooftop expertise, CN expertise, and also uh, product expertise. That's a great panel to have. And let's start with this discussion about this is specifically to Vishnu. How do you see the new open access policy panning out? The problem with Telangana has always been that it is what looks great on policy may not be necessarily great on the ground. So, how do you expect the things to be different with the new open access policy that is on the anvil and that is expected? Vishnu.
Uh, yeah, when I say now the policy is whatever Telangana has come up with the draft policy, it is we are expecting that it should be come on reality as soon as possible. And second thing, there are some modifications which regulatory commission has to look into it when they are issuing this policy completely. Like banking. See now Telangana after a long time they came up with banking or green energy open access policy. So now they have given only 1 month banking facility for green energy open access. So we are expecting, since this is the first time in Telangana where they are allowing open access after a long time, we are expecting that maybe this banking little bit further, like 3 months or 6 months, which will help the developers like us to invest more in Telangana state. This
Any
is
other aspects which you think make it different from the policy that we have had so far, apart from banking?
See, apart from banking, now scheduling is there. Scheduling where they are asking, Telangana government is giving like 15 minutes scheduling that we need to do for both generators and consumers also. Where it is better in terms of grid stability. We accept that. And many in other states, like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, scheduling is not completely, came into picture from customer end. It is only from generator side. So that is one type of aspect in Telangana, which is here. And second thing, for approval process, even though after giving the approvals and all, there is one modification we requested to Telangana Regulatory Commission, saying that in within the timeline period, if they are not giving any written communication to the generator with why they are not giving any approvals or open access approvals, then it will be a deemed approval saying that generator will be allowed for putting up a plant, but that too subject to what you say, grid availability. If you have that i mean if you have that capacity to inject into the grid, then only that will be treated as a deemed approval. But it should not be a what do you say uh, it should not be a case to the Telangana state officials where they are giving these approvals, that they cannot point out like grid availability is not there, so we cannot give you the approval.
Thank you, Vishnu, for adding that context. Naveen, I think the next question I would like to direct it at you. Just give us a sense of what is the potential of Telangana, both from a grid scale, solar and wind perspective, the C&I perspective, and the rooftop perspective. What do you think is possible, and what kind of capacities do you see coming up, given the fact that you have these new policies and will and in government in place? A broad brush question. I mean, what is the expectation of the
Yeah.
local community which you represent?
Yeah. So, Vinay, I think Telangana has been very dominant since the last 8 to 9 years in terms of utility scale power plants. So, I would first like to cover on utility scale, and then I'll move to rooftop, and then this thing. So, like you mentioned, we had a very good start in terms of when the new government was formed. Good licenses and all were given, and even we were doing open access projects at that time. And then suddenly, because the state was buying power from other states, they have ceased to give any more open access approvals. The last 5 to 6 years, I have seen humongous amount of response and requirement from industry and large scale INC of wanting to go solar. So I think the opportunity is huge. The entire Hyderabad, I think, is ready to go solar. I think it happened with Bangalore until 2018. Where all the corporates, industries, they all went green. They could take help of the open access policy there. I think we are on the verge of taking that turn right now, Vinay. I think lot of potential and lot of scope for utility scale power plants. Also, I have a feeler that state is also going to invest and set up large scale power plants with respect to having their own generation. I think Genco is going to come into active again with respect to solar and wind. And uh, uh, of course, there are other schemes like Kusum, etc., which could promote lot of small-scale solar sector for small developers and distributed generation. That is one more scheme that we have been trying to explain to the state government. That there are certain aspects that we are trying to explain to the government. How they can quickly be generating their own generation, because we would like to depend more on the state rather than buying power from the outside. So, with respect to being a consumer, I think it's a good news. I think we're going to have a very good policy. With respect to being a developer, I think a lot of players, a lot of companies, will be opening up for consuming green captive power. And with respect to small scale developers for distributed generation, also I think they're going to open up Kusum program, largely the central Kusum scheme. So I think it's going to get really active. But the challenge I see here is the land prices have gone up a lot, Vinay. So I'm wondering, it was Telangana is not it was what or it used to be in 2016. So I'm just wondering, when we had that, we don't have this. When we have this, when we are not going to have that. So I don't know how we're going to take up that challenge now. So, having said that, of course, there are a lot of government lands and a lot of unused packets of lands that can be used. So, going to rooftop, I think rooftop has been pretty active in Telangana. A lot of industries have been setting up plants up to 1 megawatt, under net metering scheme. If the state is going to imbibe the central government policy of increasing it to 10 megawatt, if you have land and space, I think that's going to be a wonderful option. But we should wait. I mean, I'm just waiting and watching whether they'll try to imbibe that. Uh, uh, and of course, I think there is some good opportunity with PHP as well, pumped hydro. So we are just waiting and watching, Vinay, while the state government is contemplating and trying to understand what's the best way to go forward. But a lot of opportunities going to come in. Is my hope. Yeah.
Thanks for that note of optimism. Happy to share that optimism with the rest of the panelists here.
Yeah.
My next question is to Priyanvada. In a particularly Telangana context,
Hmm.
Telangana is a very fairly endowed state from a solar resource point of view.
Hmm.
Uh, so the potential for utility scale solar does exist. There's land available, though like Naveen says, it's expensive.
Yeah.
Rooftop has been a booming segment. Again, the dark the dark side of the rooftop story apparently is that recently the distribution companies seem to have issued a lot of letters to rooftop owners asking for compliances on a huge range of issues,
Hmm.
ranging from the CEA technical standards to insisting on power quality tests at a frequent interval to all kinds of compliance requirements, which while being technically right, are not actually implemented in practice. So, how do you think inverter manufacturers are gearing up
Hmm.
to these challenges that the discoms are coming up with in terms of compliance with technical standards and in terms of
Hmm.
safety and the other requirements that come with these compliances? A quick
Yeah.
uh, because you come from the inverter side, I thought you'll be able to throw better light.
Yeah. Sure, sure. Thank you. So, yes, quality of the electricity that's being injected into the grid obviously is a very big issue in many of the states, especially when the uh, amount of electricity or the renewable amount is going higher and higher in the grid. So its effect on the grid is going to be higher. So this is going to come up slowly and steadily as the portion of renewable increases, and that is for sure. But the thing is, as you rightly said, it has to be decided upfront and informed upfront which are the requirements. Typically, for example, from the inverter manufacturer, the company I come from, it is not a very big challenge for us because we are a global player and we have been in all the countries around the world where actually the solar penetration has been much more, and because those countries have already the stringent rules about the regulations about these all the certifications and the requirements, even the requirements of fault right through or the harmonic requirements and everything, which are acting as say grid support functions which are required in the inverters, rather than just being a dumb solar inverter which is acting as a follower. So but obviously we also have so many other players. We also have the local players within India. We have local manufacturers. They would need to understand these requirements upfront. Many of these requirements, it is not about whether only you can comply, how you test it. These tests are expensive. You cannot produce these certificates overnight. So if these are the already existing projects, then it is required that they give certain time period to be able to comply to that, so that even though the product is complying to that, if you need the third party certificates, getting it tested from the third party laboratories and then producing the certificates next time. So it is not just about whether the quality of the product, but it is also about complying to the standards and being able to produce those test results or those certificates. So that's why it is very important that these are not asked up. These are mentioned upfront, which are required, and accordingly, then the EPCs and developer can ensure that the products that they are selecting are complying to the requirement. But yes, this will go on increasing as the number of amount of solar that we are putting onto the grid is going to increase. This is required for the stability of the grid. You would also see the requirements as the reactive power as a function of voltage, the active power control as a function of frequency, or they functions as such as Q at night, so reactive power support at night. If you are consuming a lot of, especially in the CNI segment, that is one requirement. Also, the requirements like one of the biggest challenge in the CNI sector, in the industrial sector, I would say, rather than commercial, is to maintain the power factor at the grid interconnection point after putting solar power plant there, because suddenly if your PV system is operating at unity power factor, all active power coming from your solar, but reactive still coming from the grid, your the power factor at the grid interconnection point is going to go very bad, and you'll have very high penalties. And many of the times, if this grid study has not been done before putting up the plant or before the planning phase, then the problem arises and the later on, because many of the times the power purchase agreements are done on the active power that is being sold. So then later on, even the developer would not want to go lower on the generation, because if the solar is supporting with the reactive power, your active power is going to go down, because solar inverters are tested for the apparent power as such. So there comes a challenge, and to mitigate that, these things need to be planned beforehand. And if you're planning according to these, then it should not be a problem. Then we can penetrate as a solar much higher into the system. Also, as against to the scheduling requirements and everything, probably if these becomes mandatory, then the requirements such as storage, local storage and everything would come into the play, because then giving the guarantee for the generation and everything becomes much more possible. So obviously these policies will affect the application part and the selection of the product accordingly, and the inverter manufacturers will have to change their offerings accordingly.
Thanks, Priyamuda.
Yeah,
I'll come back to you with a couple of supplementaries on that. And I'll
yeah,
now,
sure.
Anish. Anish, are you able to hear us? Can you join the call?
Yes, when I first of all, extremely disappointed with the network interruptions, but then now I'm hopefully within the network zone.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. So my specific question to you, Anish, given that you come from Amplus and done a bunch of work on the rooftop side, uh, we're given to understand that Telangana is now insisting on a very strict adherence to the CEA technical standards for connectivity to the grid under the distributed generation resources. Now, that's a bunch of compliances which are being insisted upon, ranging from, like Hemant pointed out, power factor, harmonics, DC injection, huge number of things. Now,
True.
it's from a developer's perspective, how do you see uh, developers gearing up to meet these requirements which are being insisted upon in a meticulous manner? And how much of this burden will be borne by you as developers, and how much of it will be borne by somebody like Premada who's coming from the product side? Just give me a sense of that, because a 5 kilowatt residential rooftop owner can't be expected to perform these obligations. It is again going to come back and fall squarely on the hands of either the developer or the installer or uh, the product manufacturers. Give us a sense of where how this compliance burden will be shared between these two groups.
Uh, Vinay, very beautifully you have pointed out the things we are currently facing in many of the states with respect to the compliances and such obligations which have been put for the consumers. If I talk about the scheduling part with respect to consumers, or the power factor correction, etc., this the consumers are facing a huge amount of penalty, specifically in this area. So no doubt, as Priyamvada has already very clearly stated that during the initial planning stage only we'll have to look upon on these specific things, wherein the power factor uh, arrangement has to be taken care of, wherein we do understand that through inverters we have been trying to mitigate the power factor requirements, wherein they do help us to some extent. But in case of utility scale, we face a lot of challenges when it comes to a utility scale project, whether it is CTU connected or STU connected. The requirement of the power factor correction has been a big thing we are facing currently. Plus, currently, I would also like to press upon couple of things which I have which I have come upon with respect to the policy part also, and the draft regulation also, wherein the TACRC has tried to like um like make a bible out of all the regulations, bringing in everything all together into one, wherein the open access regulations plus GOA plus CPP verification plus scheduling and forecasting, everything has been brought to like one specific document. They they have tried to pull out everything within a document. However, I really think a lot of things has to be revisited into these segments, wherein they do talk about uh, like a consumer of 100 kilowatt also opting for a open access. But then the statement is not as clear as it should be, uh, specifying about the customer being of 100 kilowatt, and then eventually expecting a scheduling on forecasting of a consumer of 100 kilowatt would be really difficult to cater upon as per the draft regulations. This was something at the generator side, completely agree that forecasting and scheduling mandates are very much acceptable. However, on the consumer side, it is little uh, like unjust for consumers of 100 kilowatt or 200 kilowatt going for such kind of scheduling requirements. That I would like to highlight. Apart from that, very beautifully they have coined up a couple of new terminologies, wherein uh, the other states have coined it as partial open access consumers and full open access consumers. Over here, they have mentioned it as scheduled open access consumers and open access consumers who are like partially driving their power from the discoms and partially through open access. They have coined that term as scheduled open access consumers. However, what I see is a lot of obligations with respect to such consumers, and availing open access has to be revisited to bring in more renewable projects in the state. So I think over and all they have tried to bring in a lot of things, but I think the the portions of couple of sections in the regulations has to be revisited to bring in all the consumers on board, or like bring further IPPs and generators on board to invest in Telangana state.
Thanks, Anish. Good point on the compliance burden of forecasting which is being cast on the consumers, which may be difficult to discharge. That's something which I think the ARC will opine upon in the representation that have been made. But I would also like to come back to another issue that has been kind of a stark contrast compared to the other states is the issue of very high cross subsidy and very high additional surcharges on open access consumers who are buying some solar generators. Currently, the additional surcharge is at 1.96 rupees a kilowatt, scheduled to be kind of continued for the next half of the year. And cross subsidy is also one of the highest in the country. Uh, this is both to Vishnu and Naveen. Do you see these things changing going forward or getting worse going forward? And what it means for the compulsion to go captive or compulsion to not to go captive in open access market? I would request both of you to just pitch in
Yeah.
on this
So
point.
So Vinay, I think ERC is already contemplating reducing the additional surcharge. I think there's already very strong, I would say, directive from ERC to reduce the additional surcharge. And cross subsidy surcharge is something that, yeah, I mean, it's. So if they want to promote in a certain way, then I think they would have to take a serious call on that, Vinay. And coming
Sorry.
to,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, and uh, coming to states, yeah, one more point is the APPC, the average pool price for Telangana is very high. It's almost close to, I think, 450 or 5 rupees. I mean, which is, I think, highest in the country as well. So with solar prices and this going so low, I think it's definitely going to help them in ARC filings, and in any which way, if they're going to go solar today, to bring that down, bring the APPC down, Vinay. So uh, in whichever way, I think both for a captive consumer or the open access player, I think they're going to do this. But again, I don't know how many developers would want to be an open access, pure open access, third party open access player today, because all you can have is a maybe 3 year or a 5 year visibility, or even less. So I really don't know how many would want to be, flying out there, risking everything with, kind of cross subsidies that we have already heard, cross subsidy and additional surcharges we already heard. So I think group captive would be the only option. Vinay. I mean, that's what is my thought process.
I think probably take off on that point that you left us with, Naveen. If
Right.
these high cross subsidy and additional surcharges are compelling people to explore the option of the captive format, it's surprising to see that that really has not really taken off. Vishnu, what do you think that's a trend that we'll expect now, given the high charges that you have for third-party open access? Will it force people to look at captive, and how do you see that playing out?
Yes, Vinay, because of this as Navin mentioned, high cross subsidy and additional surcharge in India, we think that the customer will be preferring captive or group captive when they insist for open access or a firm power throughout the year or a day, and or rooftop solar. See now, wind. If you see that it is only a seasonal for 3 to 4 months, and solar it is uniform throughout an year, maybe plus or minus 10% each and every month generation. So maybe I mean customers will be looking for captive and group captive in future. Like
Yeah, thanks for that, Vishnu. Looks like that's going to be something to watch out for. Look, I'll go back to the fact that Telangana as it stands today does not have a formal solar policy in place. The last one expired after 5 years after its issue in 2015, which means it got expired in 2020. Uh, if Telangana were to come out with a new and fresh solar policy today, what would be the ask from the developer community, the product community, uh, as to what would they want in that kind of policy, and which is different from what is already offered in the earlier one. This is an open question. Feel free to chime in.
Vinay, I think what Telangana did, I would say Telangana did a great thing in 2015 when they have given 2,000 megawatt distributed power plants across the state. I think none of, I mean, that level was done by nobody, none of the states ever, at least until then, or even later. I don't see any other states doing that. So the nature of with the nature of solar being unpredictable, and having a bell curve, etc., I think distributed generation in multiple places is a great way to go. So my ask would be to come back again with a policy like what they did in 2015, helping many small developers go green. I mean invest, and help in the renewable journey for the state. So that is one thing I would request. Of course, there are many asks with respect to open access and this thing, but that's again, it's about the attitude with which they would like to drive this whole sector itself. And I think which are less driven by what is right, and more driven by other factors. So yeah,
Anish,
I would also pray that the state should not be anti what center wants, so which will definitely kill us, which has been killing us. So I would like to have, I mean, I would like the state to have an independent policy, like how even Karnataka acts or does. So that is one more ask.
Anish, would you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, certainly. When I think, as Naveen sir has very beautifully said about what Telangana has achieved during the last policy, we need to see how Maharashtra has brought upon a net metering for 5 megawatt. I think that should be uniformly taken up everywhere, wherein they are allowing the distributed generation to grow up more than anything else, which is actually a good point to look upon the grid stability also and the load centers, wherein 5 megawatt net metering will actually enable a lot of consumers to get into renewable uh, uh, renewable segment. So yeah, that would be a really good ask to go for. uh, if we talk about the regulation wise, otherwise policy also can help to basically allow such distributed segment to come up with behind the meters, and then some sort of relief with respect to applicability of charges to these distributed generations would really help to bring in like a lot of IPPs into the and the customers to get into the renewables.
Thanks,
If we
Anish.
talk about the distributed segment, yes.
Appreciate that.
However, no doubt the ask for open access would be really different in terms of many segments, as you have very clearly mentioned that the cross subsidy and additional surcharge uh, would is actually killing the market. However, I really think they need to revisit even in the policy how they have mentioned about the applicability of additional surcharge even to the captive consumers, wherein we already have a clear judgment from Supreme Court on this specific matter.
Yeah,
So I think
important point there, Anish. I think the implementation, I think, is something that Telangana slightly lacks. So you have the clean open access rules saying something, and what is actually being done on the ground is different. Uh, like you pointed out, the caps or the ceilings on cross subsidy additional surcharge are not being followed. Captive consumers are being charged with additional surcharge despite clear Supreme Court rulings to the contrary. So I'm sure those are two of the smaller examples where Telangana seems to operate in a orbit of its own. I'm sure that will get corrected going forward. I want to bring Premada in about a larger problem, not a Telangana specific problem that the industry faces. There is a huge pushback from the regulators, the Central Electricity Authority, and they are insisting on compliance with the technical standards and incorporating these in the processes before plants get commissioned. Now, there's a fairly detailed system study that the plants have to do before they get connected to the ISPs. And it's almost they're asking us to give it 1 year ahead of the scheduled commissioning date. And amount of regulatory compliance bodies that monitor the systems, who are working closely with manufacturers to comply with that. And on the other hand, the manufacturers of inverters taking more and more time to even comply with basic stuff like the BIS requirements for inverters. I believe that has again been postponed. So it's a kind of contrasting thing where on one side the screws are being turned on the developers insisting on compliance, and on the other side the manufacturers are taking more and more time to get even basic certifications in place. Uh, this is kind of not very healthy for the industry. And how do you see this kind of a disparity playing out, and where do you think we'll be landing given this kind of situation?
Yeah. So obviously it is difficult for from the planning phase itself, for the developers, because the requirements come up, they require it to be implemented as fast as possible. But as I mentioned earlier, and as you rightly said, getting certification for some of the standards, it's not that easy if you are asking for the third party certification. If you are asking for the compliance and say manufacturer's declaration and everything, that is possible if you are doing in-house testing and you can comply to that. But to have third party laboratories, for example, even for the BIS, the problem with BIS is BIS requirements are not something very out of the world. These are similar to the IC standards which are being there in the market. So these are the basic requirements, as you rightly said. But the testing takes some time, first of all, and the costs of testing in India are much higher than even the internationally what you do. So for example, for the same test that we are doing for BIS, it is much cheaper even in Europe when you are doing those tests. So the typically for the laboratories, the charges that have been asking over here, those are also bigger. So that is another reason what I can see for the inverter manufacturers. The challenge becomes is that unless and until they have a huge volume, they understand it is for the business case, also for international players, I'm saying it becomes sometimes challenging to be able to take a decision and go fast with it. Obviously it's always there in the plan. Certification are basic things you have to do. If you have to do business in certain region, you need to first have to have the certifications complying to that region. So that is not a new case. As for BIS, actually the requirement as such, the draft BIS requirement has been there since 2016-17. So it's not something new. But then the postponement or the extension has been given because obviously we don't have enough laboratories who can test that, and their testing capacity is not matching with what products have been offering in the market. For example, most of the ground mount utility scale projects, none of them are now using 1000-volt system, but the testing laboratory, most of them cannot test 1500-volt inverters. Then how do you make sure that the compliance is there? So even though inverter manufacturers are ready to submit their products, they know their products are compliant, getting it tested from the laboratories is not possible. So when these kind of policies and requirements are put up by the government, they first need to understand whether the required infrastructure is there within the country, and then it has to be maintained. Otherwise, then alternative solutions like where a third party reports from the other laboratories outside India, the laboratories here can verify the reports by third parties and accordingly give the compliance certificate. So some middle point or middle ground has to be taken out here, so that the gap between or the time that you have between the requirement of the compliance and actually issuing the certificate would come down. As far as the requirements are concerned, these are going to go higher and higher as we talked earlier, because the more and more grid support would be required as we are putting all the renewable energy systems. So those requirements and the standard compliance. So earlier the requirement still with BIS are only pertaining to anti-islanding and the safety. These still don't cover the quality of electricity, power quality standards and everything are not covered under BIS. But if they even have to do that in future, they will have to first ensure that the infrastructure to test all of that, it is there in India. Then only they should get those requirements. Otherwise, the international third party certifications, they should allow to submit that, and so that there is no lag between the actual implementation and the requirement decisions.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah. So Vinay, basically on the large scale utility scale power plants with this new CEA regulations, now they're asking us to do the power quality studies and PSCAD studies, etc., to understand what is the reactive power compensations that are required. So we are trying to set up a 100 megawatt for NHPC in Andhra Pradesh, and this was tendered more than a year back. C regulations have come recently, so now the NHPC is insisting that we have to follow the regulations, and we
Follow.
have to set up this thing. So though the plant is 100 megawatt AC, the approximate. Right now the understanding is we might have to give 125 megawatt inverters and 125 megawatt transformers as well. So the
Wow.
capex is also going up, and to get the right guys who can do this to give us the right reactive power compensation is also I think
Yeah.
it's a new thing that has come up, and it's not just costing us, but it's also delaying the thing actually.
Yes.
Good that you pointed out. I think it's an industry-wide pain point that you have brought out here. I guess things will play out in this time. Actually, I would love to take this to the audience round now and see if we can get any questions. But if I do not see them anywhere on the chat box here, can you confirm that? Or if that is the case, we can continue for some time with the discussion for 5-10 minutes more.
We can continue the discussion. We have some time.
Sure, thanks. So I think we would like to spice things up a bit, and this is more like a rapid fire round. You are not allowed to take the answer. You are supposed to answer a yes or no or a specific number. I will start with Naveen. How many megawatts of utility scale solar do you see Telangana implementing?
Vinay, your voice was not clear.
How many megawatts of utility scale solar do you see Telangana actually commissioning in the next 2 years?
Next 2 years, at least close to a gigawatt, Vinay.
Do you see any more Telangana-based solar parks really coming up to aid in the capacity installation targets in Telangana?
Yeah. Yes, Vinay. I think solar parks are the only way to. Yes, answer is yes. Yes, only for large scale capacity addition. Yeah.
So Vishnu, this is to you. If Telangana were to go to SECI and come out with let's say 1,001 gigawatt tender today, what is the tariff that you would expect in the Telangana specific SECI tender?
I would expect around two rupees 250 in
250.
second tender.
That's a very huge range. Is it 250 or 2?
See, now panel prices are also came down, and market when you see this panel prices were high, market price was around 280, 250 in second tender.
Okay. Where do you think 2 years down the line the additional surcharge and cross subsidy surcharge for Telangana going to be in 2 years?
If Telangana is adding solar or wind capacities more, this cross subsidy and surcharge and additional surcharge can come down in next two
What,
years.
what is the single biggest ask that you have? One single thing that you would want to see in Telangana solar policy, which was not already there in the earlier policy. Name one thing that you would want to see. Top of the
In
mind.
see now in this thing it was banking. Earlier policy it was not there.
Okay. You want at least 2 to 3 months banking. That's right.
Yeah, minimum 3 to 6 months. Since this is the first time where Telangana is allowing banking, and to attract the investments in Telangana, it's better to have 3 to 6 months banking.
Okay. The next one would be to you again, Vishnu. If the forecasting and scheduling remains the way it is proposed in the draft legislation, how much as a percentage of revenue would developers need to factor in as a DSM charge, forecasting penalty charge, um, when they bid the project? Is it 1%, 2%, 3%? What is that revenue loss in terms of DSM penalties that you would factor into that?
In forecasting and scheduling, it will be around 2 to 3%.
It's a very high number, 2 to 3%.
2 to 3%. See,
Okay.
one benefit right now is because scheduling can be revisited in a day when you are giving the scheduling one day before, and during the day also you can revisit the schedule and change the schedule. But it will be a time span of 4 to 5 blocks only.
Thanks.
So
I'll move
maybe
Anish, very quickly, Anish. If you want an exemption limit to spare consumers from the burden of scheduling and forecasting, where do you want that limit to be? Give me a precise capacity number. Anish, are you there?
I think it should be specifically. When am I
Give me a
audible?
number. I don't want a long-winded answer. Just give me a number.
Yeah, certainly. I think it should be restricted to industrial consumers only. Commercial consumers and residential consumers cannot go for scheduling.
Okay, thank you. Next question to you again, Anish. Uh, then, in terms of the gap between the DSM regime at the central government and what DSM regime is currently regime is proposed here, what is the tolerance band you want for zero DSM penalties for solar? Plus or minus what percentage of this case?
I think CEA has reduced it from 15 to 10%, 0 to 10%. However, I think 0 to 15% is reasonable for solar.
Fine, fine. You wanted to retain it plus or minus
Yeah.
15%.
Yes.
Thanks for that. How much of capacity that you see Telangana adding in the next 2 years?
I believe we should like Telangana should be targeting at least around a gigawatt for distributed generation.
Only rooftop. Gigawatt is what we're installing at the India level on an annual basis, not Telangana. I think Telangana, what the
Only you're talking about rooftop only.
only rooftop.
Okay, I think like 100 to 150 megawatt will be like more than sufficient. I mean,
150
yeah, as per the current scenario, I think 100 150 megawatt can be achieved.
Okay, good. I now move to Priyamvada. Priyamvada, I think this will be again very product specific question, which up to
Okay.
25 to answer. Uh,
Okay.
there is a what is the do you see more inverters getting sold on the top side than on the grid side from the company's point of view, from your company's perspective?
Uh,
Wait,
more inverters. Sorry, more inverters getting sold.
from your company's point of view, do you foresee the inverter market being bigger for rooftops or bigger for utility scale plant? Which is the priority for you?
It will for in India it would be mixed. It would be in some regions it would be utility, in some regions it would be CNI. Typically, if you
Telangana,
uh,
what would it be?
Telangana, I think CNI, considering all the industrial zones that it has and the manufacturing and everything, I think it is going to be CNI.
Okay, from a point of view of inverter sizing, where do you see the largest inverter sizes? Today, I believe it's around 8 megawatt per inverter. Where do you see
For
this
utility cell,
for utility?
utility scale,
Where do you see that
for
number? Utility side. Where do you see that number in total? Have you put
typically, scale single inverter would be around 5 megawatt only. After that, because typically the transformer requirements and everything, if you are putting 2:1 change, so that typically limits the possibility of inverter. Otherwise, with modular size, it can go even up to 9-10 megawatt.
inverter oversizing has been a very favorite topic for everyone. Uh, you are stretching the limits of the inverter every day with every design.
Hmm.
Where do you see this trend taking us in 2 years? Is it going to be what factor of overloading can inverters take from current 45
It will go higher with even the introduction of say DC coupled storage systems. So you are with the storage system, the overloading on the DC side would be much higher. You store the excess, and then that can with that you can give the production guarantee, and the schedule and everything takes care with that. So because of the implementation of solar and the other requirements, it is going to go higher and higher.
So when storage starts coming in, both on the utility scale and also on the real life markets, how is
Yeah.
it going to impact the function and the design of the inverter? Very briefly.
So, design definitely would change depending upon the application of storage, whether the storage is just for the energy shift application or it is for, say, for the grid support functions. So, depending upon the application, whether it is a DC coupled system, AC coupled system, the configuration of the system and the energy storage would change. But it has to be mixed for strengthening the grid. It would be AC coupled as well as possibly DC coupled. Energy storage mainly DC coupled. So that's how the system design would work.
Thank you. If there's anything else the other speakers would want to pitch in, we would like to wind up here a couple of minutes more. Uh, coming close to 4:30 cutoff again. Open floor to all the panelists. We did cover floating solar. Maybe thoughts from you
Yeah.
maybe on floating solar, in which you've done some pioneering work in Telangana that will be helpful to society.
Yeah, so Vinay, floating solar, we have commissioned one project for Singareni collieries, and there's huge plan from Singareni collieries to go almost 300 megawatts of floating solar. And there are other aspects of, I mean, there are other ways as well. I mean, other opportunities and other government bodies that are planning to go solar via floating. My reservation is we are also doing a 10 megawatt floating for Bharat Petroleum right now. My reservation is I think we should not go floating solar on water that will eventually or possibly can be a drinking water. That is the only reservation I have on the floating solar. Otherwise, I think it's a good way to go solar. For all the fire water ponds, or rainwater harvesting ponds, or all the other types of mining leftover ponds, or all such lot of such areas. We can go solar. I mean, floating solar as well. So, but as of now, the way it is taking shape in the country, since we are going to use a food grade HDPE for floats, everybody thinks it's safe that it can be in the water. But I do have my reservations there, Vinay. So
Thank you for that brief impression of what the prospects of floating solar are. I'd like to kind of summarize the discussion for the benefit of the audience. Uh, Telangana is at the cusp of a point where inflection point where things are changing very rapidly for the better. uh, is moving away from the intransigence and kind of adversarial kind of relationship that renewable energy always had in Telangana. It's moving away from that. Uh, there's huge expectation of a new solar energy policy and possibly even a wind policy coming up shortly to come in the place of the expired ones. The state is also expected to come out with a fairly liberal open access policy, marrying the best of practices and ideas that have been captured in the green energy open access rules that government has put out, along with scheduling and forecasting regulations, with a couple of tweaks that the panel has already touched upon. That's another symbol of hope and kind of hope about the future. That's a positive thing to be optimistic about. We also expect grid scale tenders coming out, given the fact that Telangana has land, though it's slightly expensive. There's a lot of scope for grid scale rollouts in the next couple of years in the state of Telangana, given its current high cost, which solar can meet in the current scenario of rising module prices. That's a huge opportunity for addition of grid scale solar, and we expect that to happen as a kind of consequence. Regulatory issues remain, but it is given the fact that not many megawatts have been added in the recent past. It's going to be like an S curve going up in the next few years. Past is not going to be a comparison of past is going to be anyway. On that optimistic note, I would like to wind this kind of discussion up, and thanks to each of you for contributing to this and coming on the panel and sharing your thoughts and views and wisdom. Really deeply appreciate that, and also to Solar Quarters for organizing this. Over to you, Sakshi. You're done with it.
thanks, Vinay.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I don't think we have any questions related to the panel discussion as such. We do have some networking queries though that can be answered by the relevant speakers first. So thank you so much everyone for the insightful discussion that we had today. Big thanks to all of you here, uh, and especially to our moderator for wonderfully, uh, extending your and collaborating your knowledgeable session with us. We would also like to thank the audience and the panelists as we have come to the end of this virtual event. Uh, uh, the session is open for networking now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
thanks to
Vanessa,
everyone.
especially.
Thanks.
thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
So, आखिरी में